B1 everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. So this white supremacist narrative that your skin color is related to your IQ score, your IQ test, or your intelligence level. And that is one of the links that people deprive you from intelligence by creating this narrative and propelling this racist trope. And what we need to understand is that there's no scientific evidence to state that someone's so-called genetic makeup is a cause of a mutation which has them to have the inability to learn. And we're going to debunk that. So we're going to slow walk this thing. I'm not going to rush through this. A lot of times, family, I go through things very quickly because I understand the extension span of our people sometimes when it's not so-called entertaining. But I digress. So I'm going to slow walk this. And so I know some people are going to be popping on and off. You're at work. But hopefully you enjoy this piece of work I put together for you guys. So before we go into it further, first and foremost, let's make one thing abundantly clear. There is absolutely no scientific evidence supporting the idea that a person's skin color determines their level of intelligence. Because we have to understand that intelligence is a complex trait influenced by so many other factors, right? Environmental factors, upbringing factors, education, and eventual, so to speak, efforts in those regards. And none of these factors are determined by the color of your skin, by your melatonin content, so to speak. Because we understand the historical myths, right? We understand that has permeated and persists throughout the course of time. That the idea of your race be your superiority in therein, which absolutely makes no sense. What we need to understand is this whole race superiority subject is a weapon of systematic racism, and we definitely need to debunk that as well. Because some factors that I want to have you guys lingering in your mind as we go through this is that education plays a pivotal role in perpetuating or dispelling all these things we've spoken of thus far. And by promoting critical thinking, we can somewhat empower individuals, even ourselves, to challenge some of these baseless stereotypes and racial tropes of the system of white supremacy have put upon us. We have to encourage open dialogue with our folk. We don't have to prove nothing to anyone else. But we understand our intelligence. We understand the great many of people that we've come from. We don't deny our African lineage, right? But we live and we grovel in our foundational Black American history as well. So we have to look and empower one another by debunking these myths, because it rejects the very idea that they're somehow intellectually inferior based on your skin color, based upon your African genetics, so to speak. I know which goes a little layer deeper than skin color, but that's what they're relating to. It's one of the same. You can't have one without the other in this regards, right? I know some people are gonna bring up, well, you can have dark skin and be Indian, some people have dark skin and be Islander, but if you look at their genetic pool, they have a high concentration of African in their blood. But I'll show you my DNA after quite some time here, because again, family, I told you, I want to slow walk this so we can break it down. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to try to poke holes in this. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to try to refute this and contradict this, but so have it, because there's been so many studies. There's been so many documentaries on this very thing. So we're trying to nip it in the bud, okay? So let's move on here. It states, now this particular work, scientists found a DNA change that accounts for white skin, right? The work suggests that the skin whitening mutation occurred by chance in a single individual after the first human exodus from Africa. Now, I also want to warn you guys in disclaimer, I am going to be reading quite a bit here. Again, this is to break it down for those who stay and join me here or watch it later. I hope you enjoy this. It states that when all people were born brown skin, meaning nobody essentially has black skin, we all have different levels of brown skin, right? Black is just a race, not a skin color, but we call ourselves black. Hope that doesn't lose anyone. When all people were brown skin, okay, everybody, that person's offspring apparently thrived as humans moved northward into what is now Europe. So they're stating that people with brown skin, different shades of brown skin, move northward into Europe. So already they're establishing a narrative and perspective that white people are African. White people were black people at one point in time. And then they migrated into Europe. So there was a metamorphosis and involving and transformation of a people from being black, right, with the brown skin from Africa, into these white regressive gene albinism looking people. And we understand they're one of the same. Let me move on. That person's offspring apparently thrived as humans moved northward in what is now Europe, helping to give rise to the lightest of the world's races. Okay, they go on with this study about Penn State. Their race is vaguely defined biologically, socially, and politically concept, they noted, and skin color is only part of what race is and is not, okay? I'm gonna read a little bit here as well. As I told you, we're gonna go through this with a fine-tooth comb. It's a major finding in a very sensitive area, said Stephen Oppenheimer, an expert in anthropology, genetics at Oxford University. He was not involved in the work. Almost all differences used to differentiate population from around the world really are skin deep. The work raises a raft of new questions, not least of which is why white skin caught on so thoroughly in northern climates, or northern climes rather, once it arose. Some scientists suggest that lighter skin offer a strong survival advantage for people who migrated out of Africa by boosting their levels of bone-strengthening vitamin D. Others have poised that its novelty and showness simply made it more attractive to those seeking mates. The work also reveals for the first time that Asians, who are their relatively light-skinned to different mutations, that means the light skin arose independently at least twice in human evolution. In each case affecting population with a facial and other traits that today are commonly regarded as hallmarks of Caucasian and Asian races, okay? Now, look at this study by Keith Chang. Even study leader Keith Chang said he was at first uncomfortable talking about the new work, fearing that the finding of such a clear genetic difference between people of African and European ancestries might reawaken, discredit assertions of other purported inborn differences between races, the most long-standing and inflammatory of those being intelligence. Okay, you see how we're building up? We're getting deeper. I think human beings are extremely insecure and look to the visual cues of sameness to feel better. And people will do bad things to people who look different. People will do bad things to people who look different. The discovery described in today's issue of the journal Science was an unexpected growth of studies Chang and his colleagues were conducting on inch-long zebrafish, which are popular research tool for geneticists and developmental biologists, have identified a gene that, when mutated, interferes with its ability to make it characteristic black stripes. The team scanned human DNA databases to see if a similar gene resides in people. To their surprise, they found virtually identical pigment-building genes in humans, chickens, dogs, cows, and many other species, and an indication of its biological value. They got a bigger surprise when they looked in a new database comparing the genomes of 4 of the world's major racial groups that showed that whites with Northern and Western European ancestry have a mutated version of the gene, Skin color is a reflection of the amount and distribution of pigment melanin, which in human protects against damaging ultraviolet rays, but in other species also used for camouflage or other purposes. The mutation that deprives zebrafish of their stripes blocks the creation of a protein whose job is to move charged atoms across cell membranes, an obscure process that is crucial to the accumulation of melanin inside cells. Now we're getting deeper. Humans of European descent, Chains team found, bear a slightly different mutation that hobbles the same protein with similar effect. The defect does not affect melanin disposition in other parts of the body, including the hair and eyes, whose tints are under the control of other genes. A few genes have previously been associated with human pigment disorder. Okay, human pigment disorder. Most notably, those that, when mutated, led to albinism. So if white people, if Anglo-Saxons have a recessive gene, that's due to some sort of mutation, okay, to some sort of albinism. Okay, so we already established through this one study, I know there's many others, but go look at them, go read them, okay? Always fact check the checker, okay? But you're gonna see there's a lot of information scientifically that corresponds with this. It says an extreme form of pigment loss, but the newly found glitch is the first found to play a role in the formation of normal white skin. So we went from Africans who were brown skinned, migrated into Europe, and for the adaptation, that was one, evolving transformation of the Homo sapien people, right? Which we are now. There was a transformation that occurred because of evolution and also the environment. And then secondly, cases of albinism, of a mutation, that is a cell signifier for that recessive gene that white people have, okay? And family, I'm no doctor, I'm no geneticist, I'm just a guy who's reading on the internet. That's all I'm doing. Then it says that Penn State team calculates that the gene, known as you see on the screen here, is responsible for about 1/3 of the pigment loss that made black skin white. Interesting. That made black skin white. So are we saying Europeans are Africans? And we're talking about 45,000 years ago. Okay, there's been a lot of mutations and transformation through that time. But and some of you are like, yeah, we know all people come from Africa. But there's a relation here. The one thing, and you know what? I'll give you the bottom line up front. Here you go. A lot of you scholars are going to stay until the end of the video. And I know some people want to get the information and go. Here we go in less than 15 seconds. Well, more like 15 minutes. But anyway, the narrative that black people are genetically inferior, which justify discrimination, slavery, racism, etc., and the deprivation of resources in matter what country we are in, right? That we should be treated less than human, America, right? 3/5 of a human. I say all that to say then, our intelligence has nothing to do with genetics. Your intelligence is a direct link and correlation to your environment. If you took inner city black kids and you compared them against suburban black kids, the suburban black kids will score higher on the test averagely than the urban city/city kids. And that's what we need to understand, the correlation here. IQ has nothing to do with skin color. It has to do with your environment. There has been no discrepancy reported when it comes to genetics that your IQ is predicated upon your skin color and that only a few of you will really score high. Should we even challenge the test? Should we do that? Because who created the test? Did black people create the test or did white people create the test? Oh, well, these are international. From a African standpoint or from a European standpoint? Oh, now we get into it. So for those of you who only had 15 minutes, that's the gist of the video. You got the meat and potatoes up front. For the rest of you scholars out there, we're going to keep rocking on, okay? There's a lot of more information. I'm not going to go with this particular one, but we will have that discussion, okay? Because I want to circle through these things so you guys can understand, all right? Now look at this one right here. Out of Africa, the people of continents and islands tracing unparental gene trees across the map. Okay, I'm not going to go into all of that. I'm going to go right into the introduction. And then you see the key words up there. Now, some of these words I'm going to mumble, flip through, because there's a lot of genetic terms or unfamiliar words that I don't say on a regular basis. So excuse me if you know how to pronounce them and I don't. Just cover your ears. It states that this population-based approach had problems of resolution and dating, but results were largely consistent with an African ancestry for the atomically modern humans. You're going to keep seeing AMH, atomically modern humans, okay? It says, following the discovery of a high rate of single deletion in the Pacific, protecting against and selecting by malaria, specific variants were shown to link Melanesian to Polynesian, tracing an ancient state migration that was only recently fully elucidating mitochondrial DNA. It says that samples were collected in 1980s for these studies, but by the authors and others were used to construct a worldwide beta-globin locus phylogenetic based on population genetic distance, analysis of restriction, fragment, length, polymorphism, right? And it goes, states on, I'm trying to get through it, which unambiguously resolved Africans as the deepest single ancestral branch from which all non-African groups arrive, just scoping the famous mitochondrial Eve. That's what I'm talking about. So we're debunking the myth consistently here, family, because if they want to keep pushing that, Asians are smarter than white folk and white folk are smarter than black folk. What I'm basically trying to say here, through research and discovery, that your genetics and or your skin color has nothing to do with your intelligence level. It has everything to do with deprivation and resources. If you have the resources to do better, genetically, Homo sapiens will do better. But if you deprive them of the basic resources, I now have to focus on resources versus evolution, versus advancement. That makes a lot of sense, does it not? The funding of a greater genetic diversity within Africa when compared with outside is now abundantly supported by many genetic markers. Africa is the most likely geographical origin for a modern human dispersal. That's what they're talking about. And it goes on the migration of people, Africa, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, initially into Bali and then Australia. Okay, they get into all those details. But the concept that modern human range extension out of Africa proceeded initially along coastlines has depended largely on the rapidity of this movement as inferred by genetic phylogeographical, because only 3 key founder mtDNA haplotypes exist, M, N, and R. Okay, and it goes on to say some other information, right? I'm just doubling down here, family. I'm just doubling down here a little bit. I'm going to read just a little bit of this so we kind of understand how this in groups Jewish people too, right? Because a lot of times we hear that narrative that Jewish people are black, Jewish people are white, right? The Ashkenazi Jews, they're white people. Yeah, some people may acknowledge that there's black Jewish people, American black Jewish people, Ethiopian in Israel Jewish people, and that Jewish people as a whole are not one race, because Jewish as a whole is more so a religion. And then when they start labeling like Ashkenazi Jews, more so as an ethnic of a religion that is somehow a different people. but that's untrue. Now, when we speak about Jewish people in America, more people look towards white-looking Jews, the whiteness of a Jew, okay? So, as I broke that down for you guys, I want you to remember that. And look at the title here, The History of African Gene Flow into Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. So let me get right to it. Previous genetic studies have suggested a history of sub-Saharan African gene flow into some West Eurasian populations after the initial dispersal out of Africa that occurred at least 45,000 years ago, okay? And I'm gonna skip down here a little bit. All Southern Europeans have inherited 1 to 3% African ancestry, right? Again, we're talking about genetics, but no one's talking about so-called brain matter, the ability to learn and to increase your intellect and remember and recall and regurgitate and have a different vernacular and vocabulary of retention of words to communicate the same language on a high level. That's what they're not stating here, because your head size, because African Americans and Africans in general, foundational Black Americans, and African Americans as well, people from Africa come over here and get their American citizenship, and Africans generally have a smaller head than Anglo-Saxons. Yeah. If you look at the average size of a Black person's head versus the average size of a white person's head, they have bigger heads. But there's no scientific evidence from them or from us to state because your head is bigger, thus your brain is bigger, that is why you're smarter. There's no scientific evidence. This is the people saying a bunch of bullshit on the internet and recorded themselves, like I'm doing now, but I'm debunking that with their own proof, okay? It states here that the Levantine groups harbor 4 to 15% African ancestry with an average mixture date of about 32 generations. We also detect 3 to 5% of sub-Saharan African ancestry in all eight of the diverse Jewish population that was analyzed. Can I highlight that? For people who say what people aren't and are. And again, this is from the NLM.gov, okay? National Institutes of Health.gov, which is a federal government American website. So Blacklogic is not making this up. This may reflect the descent of these groups from a common ancestral population that already has some African ancestry prior to the Jewish diasporas, right? Here we apply genomic methods to show that proportion of African ancestry in many Southern European groups is 1 to 3%. They go on to the Middle Eastern groups, is 4 to 15%, and Jewish groups is 3 to 5%. Interesting. And you guys can research this for yourself, of course. It says, have also inherited genetic material of African origin due to subsequent migrations. These have identified haplogroups that are characteristic of sub-Saharan Africans and Southern Europeans and Levantines, but not in Northern Europeans. Presented nuclear genome-based evidence of sharing of sub-Saharan African ancestry in some West Eurasians by identifying a north-south gradient of haplotype sharing between Europeans and sub-Saharan Africans. So basically, all of these studies is showing scientifically that white people is a mutation and a genetic defect of Black people. So you saying because of that genetic mutation or that genetic defect, that through the lightening and evolution of skin, that your brains and heads grew larger, thus your intelligence. And we still don't know the gravity of the brain, right? You guys can look that up. You can look up how much information can the brain store? And you're going to see all these different studies because it's almost endless because we have yet to reach our full potential as human beings. They're saying all these super intelligent people was using 20% of their brain, 10% of their brain. You got all these different studies and measures of metrics to suggest that highly intelligent people use 10% of their brain. Okay, we can go with that narrative. Let's just say that's true, okay, for the sake of argument. What if we access 50%? Look at the things that human beings, look at the strides that we're making at only operating at 10% of our brain capacity. So I say that to say, are we going to start weighing brains and base the information off the weight of the brain, thus it's bigger, thus it can store more, thus it would advance faster? No, there's no evidence to that. There's no evidence at all to that. But I'm showing you guys the data here so you understand what I'm coming from. This is about debunking the stereotypical racial narrative that somehow Black people are inferior because of their skin color. Black people essentially are inferior because of our head size. And any person that brings up that argument from you, you have one or two things that you can do. Totally ignore it, which is probably the best things, because you know how we start getting emotional, we start wanting to knock it, because they use these racial tropes. Or debate them. Debate them. Be prepared for a debate. See, I'm not saying that a lot of our people need to be historians or know a certain level of information. Just be aware of it. Just be aware of it. Because it may come in handy when you really want to speak, but you don't have the information to back it. You don't have the study, because you'll have all these random people, okay? You'll have all these random people who this is the only thing they do. And they will pull out all these independent scientists and all these independent groups to prove themselves right, that you are inferior to me. Why even have that argument? You see what I'm saying? Why would a white person, why would someone of lighter skin, why would an Asian person have that particular conversation with a Black person? First of all, they're going to be read up. They're going to know their shit, right? According to their white supremacist narrative and ideology, and those who wrote studies and did some sort of scientific studies. But see, when you hit them with facts like the federal government, so you're saying the entire government is lying versus these one or two people that kind of feeds into the white supremacist narrative versus the government, who is foundationally white and foundationally racist. So you're saying they're even lying on themselves now? No. The truth will empower people, and the truth will come to light. Okay? That's what I'm getting to, family. Let me move on here, because there was a link here. Let me see. Let me get out of this. Here it is. When I looked through this list, I looked at all these countries. And yeah, all these countries has a population of Black people. But wait till you get to the high numbers. This is the IQ test of countries from 1 to 300 or something like that. I don't know. But I just want you to look at some of the countries. The majority of these countries are white, Hispanic, and Asian, right? And who created the IQ test? We'll look at it. So I'm not going to call out all these countries, but Singapore is number 1. Let's just kind of read these first 6 or 7. Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, China, all Asian countries, right? So that's why white supremacists tell you, well, when they ask you these questions of why Black people are so stupid, why Black people are so dumb, why you don't score high on the IQ test, that's how they're saying it. And they say, I'm not saying it to be racist because Asians are smarter than white folk. Let me tell you, in the system of white supremacy, who cares who's smarter than who? Because regardless if Asians are smarter than white folk, when it comes to the Western European powers controlling world domination in the system of white supremacy, who cares who's smarter? I'm still richer and I can still do what the hell I want to do. That's what it's all about. It's about power. And these white supremacists, they try to further degrade black folk by these things, but we understand it's about power. The power to control people to do your will. That's what it's about. Netherlands, number 8. Iceland. The United Kingdom, number 16. Okay? United Kingdom, number 16. Why did I say that? You know, United Kingdom is just sisters and brothers of the United States of America. America, where you at, America? 90-something, I believe, right? Where we at? Where's America at? Did I miss us? Oh, we're 28. Okay, so we're behind the UK. So British folk tell you they're smarter than supposedly, according to some sort of IQ test, they are. But family, the point I'm getting here is you go through all these countries that are white and Asian, right? In Middle Eastern, white, Asian, and Middle Eastern, right? White, Asian, Middle Eastern, all before, even countries like Afghanistan, right? Middle East. Then you come to number 90. You come to some of the dark melanated countries in Africa. Kenyans, dark skin. Tanzania, all these have a high concentration of dark skinned people. Ivory Coast, even South Africa, the population of Boers and white South Africans around 8% to be generous. 8%, 9%, right? So this country is majority dark-skinned African, right? And the only reason why I'm saying that because countries like Algeria have white-skinned Africa, and parts of South Africa have white-skinned Africans, okay? So that's why I'm stating that. Sudan, very, very dark people. Nigeria, Ghana, Chad, all these are dark-skinned African countries. Mali, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Senegal, Gambia, Gabon, right? And this is, believe it or not, this is an African country, family. A lot of people don't know that. Equatorial Guinea, this is a country, Southwest Africa, that actually speaks Spanish. One of their national languages. This is one of the only countries in Africa that was colonized by the British. By the Spaniards. So a lot of people don't know that there's an African country that the national language is Spanish. Okay? Now, I want to take a turn here to further, again, we are debunking and dispelling all of these lopes, lies, and stereotypes. Okay? And for this particular one, I'm going to shorten it down a little bit. I'm going to just read my highlighted portion. If you guys want context, this next bit of information is coming from academic.oup.com, okay? So I'm just trying to get my sizing right. Give me 1 second here. So much for Geek Squad helping me out, but I'm still rocking with it, family. Give me 1 second here. It's taking its time. There we go. Okay, now it's too small. But anyway, I'm going to rock with it. So the name of this one, Stability and Change in Children's Intelligence, okay, a comparison of two social economically communities, right? The differences, the disparities, which in both. 2, again, we have to build this up from being a child of the intelligence level and these so-called scores on IQ. Well, what are the causes of these low IQs if we already debunked the myth about genetics? If we already debunked the myth about skin color, as we did, okay? We went to governmental sites, extracted information, got some context and understanding. And now we're moving to, well, why aren't these scores as of equal of people from different races and different groups? So the question I pose is this, as we're about to dive into this. If there's no genetic defect in the transformation of black skin to white, then the evolution of man, that heads got bigger, brains got better. There's no scientific genetic information that states just because your head is bigger and your brain is bigger means you're smarter. But then don't forget, there's a different configuration of deriving from Neanderthals, right? The savagery in that. But I digress. Somebody got what I was getting at. But anyway. So let's go down here, family. It says, despite controversy about the meaning and nature of general intelligence, few would dispute the claim that scores on standardized intelligence quotient tests as strong predictors of important outcomes for members of both majority and minority groups. So that's white and black folk. Of course, you're going to put Hispanic, but it's about black and white folks. IQ scores are not immutable. Repeated IQ testing during childhood receive considerable change within individuals. However, the cause of IQ change beyond unreliability remain unclear. An inverse relation between IQ and age has been reported in the groups of children living under various conditions of deprivation. This evidence, which suggests a decline in IQ with increasing age among socially disadvantaged children, is based on cross-sectional studies of atypical groups conducted several decades ago. Furthermore, familial and the community contributions to IQ change were not distinguished in these studies. Wow. That was powerful. And now we're about to get into the nitty-gritty of it, okay? Family factors were indexed by the maternal IQ, maternal education, and single parent status. Mass incarceration of the black male led to single household, led to, you guys get what I'm getting at. All factors that are related to children's IQ. Disadvantaged community was indexed by residents in the inner city in contrast to a middle-class suburb. Interesting. Okay. Let me scroll down here a little bit. Results. I'm just going right to it, family. These data suggest a decline in IQ between ages 6 and 11 years of age in urban children, but not in suburban children. Not in suburban children, okay? Yeah, I had to go through all this to describe just a little bit of information. Discussion. Our results suggest that growing up in the inner city might impose disadvantages that lead to a decline in children's IQ score from ages 6 to 11. On average, the IQs of urban children decline by more than 5 points. Deprivation of resources. I'm from Washington, D.C., the inner city. Our classrooms were larger than those in the suburbs. Suburb classes are usually like 20 kids per child. In the inner city, it was more like 40 per class. What am I getting at? Because we're going to get into the test scores of black kids in the suburbs and black kids in the inner city. So I'm not stating that those black kids in the city, okay, I'm not stating that they're dumber or less intelligent. They're just not provided the same opportunity with resources in order to be on the same level of those kids in the suburbs. And one of those direct correlations to that is the overpopulation. Why do a lot of black people live in and around cities? Because of jobs. We were the workforce of America. Before, Democratic and some Republican parties started doing catch and release at the border. And now the South American and Central America countries are now the new workforce and voting base for the Democratic Party. Again, I'm apolitical, so don't quote me on that. Back to intelligence, as we were talking about one of the direct correlations of it. So again, if you guys want to go research that, I'll gave out the reference there, and let's move on. Urban schools versus suburban schools. Okay? It states here, urban schools have a lot more disadvantages than suburban schools. Poverty, okay? People who live usually in the inner city are living in apartments. They have a high poverty rate, and that's unfortunately the majority Black Americans, low income. The average Black American makes anywhere from $45,000 to $50,000. Kids are forced to go to schools in the inner city. It says teachers in the urban schools have more work opposed to suburban teachers. Teachers in suburban schools are closer to their students because there are fewer of them. Some teachers in the inner city don't care for some of the children in their class because they have so damn many. It states here, in the inner city, can we blow this up? We'll blow it up. In the inner city, the population of students is drastically higher than in the suburbs. A classroom size in inner city school might be nearly 40 students, where a suburban school might have a class less than 20. This is true. I went to Highland Elementary School in Washington, D.C. I think the new name of it is Furby Hope. And I swore it was about 30 kids, 35 kids to a classroom. Then we go visit another school on a school trip. Not only was the school bigger, had more facilities, well-lit new books, their classroom sizes were smaller and had more teachers. And believe it or not, family, majority of the students there were Black. The demographics of that area was majority Black. But they spoke different. A lot of different characteristics because of the way and where you were raised and how. Because there's upstanding Black communities and there's downstanding Black communities. There's upstanding white, upstanding Hispanic, blah, blah. You get the narrative, right? Then there's downstanding. It's about deprivation. That's what people are not talking about when it comes to the lack of IQ score. They're not doing a deep dive analysis. Dropout rate. It states here that, give it a second to boot up here, family. Any day. I don't know what's going on with that. Let me see if I can refresh it really quickly. I'm just trying to get all these hypotheses and theories. I'm just going to use their own information against them. The information that they have posted, the research and all this science, skin grafting, brain examinations. That's why they want to donate your body so they can scan your genes and try to figure out a new white supremacist narrative. But then when you get the true information from their own website, let me go back up here to one of the on the top here, so I can make sure you can reference the information for yourselves. But I know you guys must be tired of how people look at you as dumb, dirty, degenerate because of your skin color. They don't know who you are. They don't know your true intelligence. They even did a study that Black children learn differently than white children. Could that, I mean, we're talking about on a whole, family, on an average, not each and every single one. We're not talking about that. Are you guys aware of that? They did a study about that. If my internet was slower than dial-up, I would have looked it for you guys. But here's a website that you guys can reference some of the information. The National Library of Medicine, okay? National Center of Biotechnology Information, and this is a federal government website, okay? So a lot of you guys may be familiar with that. But family, that's all I have for you guys today. I didn't want to waste a lot of your time, but we had to really debunk this IQ linked to your skin color and or your genetic line. We walked through this, family, to a point of revelation that white people descended from black people. They metamorphosized through black people. By black people moving into Europe, evolving, and similarly, or at the same time, essentially, having genetic defects with albinism. And then thus their reproduction and reproduction, their population increase. And then even in one of these medical studies, it stated that because of Asians' light skin, they're more like a trimutation. I know a lot of you are like, what? I'm not making this up, family. I'm trying to look at it for you right here really quickly, so people don't think I'm talking out the side of my neck. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. We have to dispel some of these lies. Okay. Well, this is one of the things that's stated here. It says, resolve Africans as the deepest single ancestral branch from which all non-African groups arise. Just scoping the famous mitochondrial Eve, okay? They're talking about that everybody came from Africans, right? This base population-based approach had problems of resolution and dating, but was results largely consistent with an African ancestry for anatomically modern humans. That's what they're referring to, okay? I really wanted to point out the part of how essentially Asians mutated, because that's in here as well, okay? Because just because of your race or your skin color has nothing to do with your IQ, has nothing to do with your intelligence level. And here's another thing you guys should really factor in. Who created the IQ test? Do you think there was a bunch of Black Americans that sat down like, you know what, we're going to see how smart people are? Or do you think that the IQ test was created as a white supremacist weapon, knowing that the Black American, okay, descendant of slaves, and we're talking about they did these tests of melanated people as they was coming out of slavery. They don't know your language. You deprive them of science. You deprive them of agriculture, right? The only thing they know how to pick cotton, pick cotton, pick cotton. We're talking about generationally. Maybe the first generation of Africans over here came over here with all those skills, but then we lost that because we didn't do them anymore, and generations wasn't teaching generations, and we only learned how to do one thing: pick cotton, farm sugar, Indiegogo, tobacco, all those things. The commodities of the slave trade. That's why. That's why. Yeah, family, I couldn't find it, but nonetheless, I told you guys the website. I may come on later to talk about voter ID. Man, voter ID. Let me just give you a quick hit real quick. Voter ID. Is it needed? Is it wanted? Is it racist? Well, let me give you once again a sneak peek. Let me give you the bottom line up front. We need voter ID. You see the people up in Chicago and New York and Arizona and all these other sanctuary cities that majority of Black people live. How do you think these people are getting there? By the way of the Democratic Party. Don't turn off yet. No matter if you're Democrat or Republican, I'm apolitical. How do you think they got there? By the Democratic Party, correct? Now you're complaining about all these people in your neighborhood, the same way they did us back in the 60s with an influx of Asians being dropped off in the Black community and soaking up the resources and starting and building their own businesses in place of ours. Let's get the Black folk out with inflationary loans and put the agents in as a buffer class to them and to us. It's a two-way buffer. That's what occurred. So when we're talking about voter ID, why do you think all of a sudden these Democratic governors and mayors is getting appointed by the president in some way to hurry up and give these people IDs? Because you know what, I'm gonna do a separate video. It's gonna be shorter. I was about to get into the whole video, family, but it's gonna be shorter than this. I see you guys on the next one.